Well, hello there. How are you? I hope this finds you well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. We talk about us, you and me, and our world, and all the things that make it so unusual, and gratifying, and wonderful, and frustrating, and all the rest of it. This week, of course, is my last week doing the program, winding up some 22,000 hours on that network. I don't know the exact number, but it's pretty good, pretty decent number. It's a long time, a lot of hours and a lot of frustrations and a lot of good moments and ways we've influenced people and ways they've certainly influenced me. I've been thinking about the things that have influenced me, and they are myriad. Some important, some are not. People ask so often, who the hell are you? And, well, stick around. I used to tell people, listen to the program, and whatever it is I am, you'll very likely be able to identify. Well, getting ready for this final week has not been easy, and I'm still not at all sure what you're going to hear. I'm hopeful that many of you will be listening. The final show on Friday, we will, if possible, play a couple of tapes. The original program, hopefully, that we did on May the 14th, 1975, from New Brunswick, New Jersey, and the very first national program on, November the 2nd, 1981, from 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and some of the folks that were there and whatever, and who knows what's in between. But I've been doing something for the last couple of days, and it's been extremely extemporaneous. Is that possible to be extremely? Well, I'm just jotting some things down. The list is getting fairly long, several pages long. And what I've been jotting down is little incidents in my life. Some funny, some important, some not particularly important, a good many related with the program, but not all. Some of the influences on me that at the time I had no idea were influencing me with any profundity, and many of these things didn't. And the other side of that, many have stayed with me for what has turned into a rather long life. And I've been jotting these little one-line memory joggers down. And I sat down and figured it out earlier today. If I only allowed 10 minutes or so for each one of these, and some would take mercifully less than that, and ruminating, others would be longer. But if I did them all, there'd be something like 8 hours. It could be a book is what it comes. I said to myself, my God, this could be a book. Whether anybody would want to read that book is another question. Well, my intention was to share a few of these things with you. Maybe on the last day, then I figured, we're going to give the listeners a good shot during that period of time. And so maybe the day before, and then, as I said, I sat down and I didn't spend a great deal of time with any one of these items. But I thought about it. So I cannot tell you, no way that I can communicate how generous you people have been toward me. Hundreds of emails from, son of a gun, into each life a little bit of, this is live radio, and why not finish it up the way it started with mistakes from time to time. I'm sitting here carrying on a conversation with you guys, and all of a sudden I find gone away. where our line just dropped out. Well, and I don't know when that happened, and the studio can't pin it down. So I'm going to start where I thought it was important that I was saying that you guys have been so incredibly generous with me in terms of helping me, in terms of your comments, that I have had some positive influence on your life, some of it minor, and in a couple of cases had everything to do with continuing life. And I'm going to share some of those things with you. So what I decided to do, and I mentioned, and again, forgive me for redundancy because I don't know where the stupid line dropped out. I'm going to do some of these with you. If I figured it out, it would be 8 hours or more easily, and the list is growing, if I just spent a few minutes on each one of these little items. Some, and I have, what I intended to do, and maybe I will tomorrow, is put them in some sort of order, some kind of an order. But I just have a whole bunch of stuff I've written down. Some of these things had a great deal of influence on my life. And thanks for asking. I talked about Sam Lafer and Joe Schaffman. The boys, Sam and Joe, they operated the Service Drug Company. Two less likely partners, but then there's a lot to be said for two people partnering up with each with their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Sam and Joe. I walked into the drugstore, and I'd already worked in one drugstore for a Mr. Price Remley's drugstore. I worked for, and I heard there's a job opening or something at Sam and Joe's. And I walked in and I talked to Joe Schaffman. I remember it as it might have been yesterday. And we talked, and I told him that I'd done deliveries and I could do that, and I'd worked the soda fountain. I think I was perhaps 14 at the time, maybe a little younger. I could ride a bike, I could make deliveries, I could do it all, work behind the counter, sweep. He said, well, maybe we'll give you a try. How much do you think you're worth? That's a tough question for any employee when you go looking for a job, when they ask you, how much do you want? Well, I thought about that. Of course, Joe deliberately, I think, put me on the spot. And I finally said, well, I think I'm worth 35 cents an hour. He kind of looked at me and he says, we can manage that or something similar. I went to work for 35 cents an hour. And I thought I was being pretty well paid. Of course, I made a nickel tip here and a dime there, which sweetened the pot considerably. Sam and Joe were, as I said, two entirely different men. Joe, this is a drugstore, mind you, a graduate of Rutgers University in New Jersey, Phi Beta Kappa, he wore his pin. I'm not sure where he went to pharmacy school, but he was an RP, registered pharmacist. Like Sam, he worked incredible hours, always pleasant to the customers. And the word service, which I don't know who named it, but it was everything there. They always gave service. And that was a lifelong lesson. More in a moment. I'm Bruce Williams. I've been talking about my mentors, the two guys I learned more from, I guess, outside of my family than anyone who has influenced my life, and there have been many. Joe was a working hard guy. Had a family, lived not too far from where the store was, which was open from the crack of dawn until 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. I used to walk home with him from time to time because he lived on 19th and I lived on 18th Street. Sam, and we'll get into a lot of stuff maybe that I hadn't even thought about in 50 years. I worked for them in other areas beside the drugstore. Nonetheless, Sam Lafer was another guy altogether. Sam Lafer, the other partner, never saw the inside of a college, and I don't believe a high school. Never, ever went to pharmacy school. Of course, nobody knew that. Sam made prescriptions behind the counter just like Joe did. And ultimately, when I was around 14, just like I did, I actually compounded prescriptions, mixed up the ingredients, crushed them up with a mortar and pestle, put in distilled water to make the stuff into a mush, and actually made pills and poured the dry stuff into capsules. I was a working pharmacist at 14. That's hard to believe today. Phone used to ring from time to time, and I think I knew who, but it doesn't matter. But it was from an employee of the Board of Pharmacy to tell Sam he better go home because there was an inspection coming up that day. Well, wherever Joe was, he was called in right away if he wasn't there. I don't ever recall having to call in another pharmacist, but that might have happened. And so when the pharmacy inspector came, miraculously, boy, Joe, you must work it forever, because he was always there. They made their inspections, filled out their reports, and went on their way and called Sam at home. Came back to work. Was that proper? No. Did anybody get injured? Absolutely not. Today, you'd say, what a terrible thing. Actually, pharmacists in those days were far more skilled in many ways than the pharmacists of today. Pharmacists of today, for the most part, there's very little compounding goes on in the pharmacy. They move a medication from one container to another. You've seen the things on television where they put the pills on a plastic tray and count out 50 and so forth. Where in those days, compounding was the way that prescriptions were filled. All of the different ingredients were in separate bottles, and you mixed them all together. Sam was something else that I had never heard of at the time. Sam was an Orthodox Jew. Joe was secular. Joe didn't have any great affinity toward religious holidays or whatever. Sam, on the other hand, I had no idea what kosher meant at that time. And I remember as clearly as yesterday when Rosie Lafer dropped the groceries, by mistake, in the drugstore on the floor. And as Sam helped pick it up, he found some non-kosher food in that bag. If I remember correctly, it was some kind of a chicken thing or whatever. Never saw that man before or since lose it like he lost it then. He was throwing stuff around the store and cursing her out and whatever, and she was crying, Sam, I only bought it because it was good for you, and I couldn't find it made kosher and whatever. I had no idea what this was all about. No idea whatever. But as the years passed, and I worked for Sam and Joe from that time for 35 cents an hour, I probably got up to half a buck or something, whatever. But I worked for them until I went into the Air Force at close to 19. When other kids went home from school, I went to work till 10 o'clock at night, every night. When I was involved in sports, they were, okay, you can go out for football or whatever it was. But when the other kids came home from practice at 5 or whenever the sun went down, I went down to the drugstore and worked till 10 o'clock. I worked all day Saturday, and sometimes, well, I worked a fraction of Sunday usually, but not necessarily all day. Had to go in at the crack of dawn on Sunday to make the papers. papers came, and I guess they still do, came in a million sections, and we'd line up a whole bunch of them on the stools at the soda fountain and put the papers together. These two guys taught me more about, and you're going to say ethics, you could get upset, but no, about ethics and about how to run a business and how to handle it than I can ever tell you. Sam and Joe, my mentors. I'm Bruce Williams. If you'd like to join us briefly on the phone, 877-287-4964. 877-287-4964. The email, askbruce@brucewilliams.com. I made an election which is maybe not the best, and I'd like to hear from you. Just if you want to drop me an email, say, hey, I like this stuff, or knock it off, Bruce. Either way, I will be influenced by what you have to say. But I've been asked so many times, who are you and how did you get where you are? And I've really never answered that question. And in the waning moments of the program, I thought maybe that would be worth sharing. So we'll take a call here and there, but I want to talk about those things which have influenced me, and some of them you will very likely laugh at, and some, well, we'll see. Woonsocket, Rhode Island, hello there.
Hi, this is Sherry.
Yes, Sherry.
I love the way that you have these stories. They're very, very interesting. I listen to you every night, and my sister's mother-in-law listens to you from Auburn, Mass. So we're going to miss you.
Well, you're very generous, Sherry, and I appreciate that. I will miss you guys as well. I truly will. I don't know what people do between 7 and 10. I've been doing this so many years that I'll have to figure it out. You know, one thing I figured out tonight, I was watching the news, and they showed the NBC program guide for tonight. Well, I tell you one thing I'm sure I will not be doing is watching much television. I couldn't believe, I never get to watch between 7 and 10, which apparently God has been merciful, because I couldn't imagine the garbage that's what's going to fill up tonight's schedule on NBC. I think somebody must be smoking the wrong kind of cigarettes.
I guess so.
But I will find something to do, and I'm sure of that. Jerry, thank you so very, very much for your call. Let me know if you like this sort of ruminating, which I happen to enjoy, but more important, it is who I am. You have so many stories about men and women, more men than women. Certainly when I was a kid, dodging a draft, didn't want to go, oh my, hell no, we won't go, back in the 60s and whatever, burn your draft card, protest, all that sort of stuff, none of which I could identify with when I was of draft age, and nor can I identify with in my geezerhood here. Really. I don't understand people that say, oh, I don't want to go into, can't waste time and all that sort of stuff. I am a firm believer there should be a draft. Every one of the kids that come along, my grandchildren included, ought to be required to do some kind of governmental service. And very quickly, none of my children were in the military. They were bright enough not to get born when there was some activity going on when they reached that age. One tried to get in, but he was too tall. Can you believe that? He was too tall to get in to, at that time it was the Navy aviation thing, because he was too tall for an ejection seat. Didn't slow him down. He obviously is an accomplished pilot today. But in any event, a few days after I finished high school, they decided to have a little conflict. And I, was aware of it. I remember going down to the New Jersey shore, down the shore, as we said, and I was looking around for a job for the following year. I was working at a pharmacy. Here I was, soda jerking again, at Angelo's Pharmacy. But in any event, Guy said, oh, yeah, I went down, they had the Ferris wheel and the merry-go-round and whatever, and I went to see the guy. I'd seen him around, and I asked him about a job for next year. He said, well, you're not in the Army. Sure, come on down and you got a job, because, I know you are. And I laughed. What do you mean in the Army? What kind of stuff was that? I was at the time contemplating, and I didn't accept a football scholarship to go to college. Well, what do you mean go in the Army? Why the heck would I go in the Army? I'm only 18 years old, for pity's sake. Well, things got much more serious. It was supposed to be, it started in June, and everybody was going to be home by Christmas. Well, didn't work out that way. And before Christmas, I decided that this thing is a little more serious. I did not play football. I did go to school at night and worked in a factory from midnight to 8 in the morning, 6 days a week, for $1.10 an hour, plus I think a 10% differential for that midnight shift. Made television tubes, would you believe, which is a whole other story. But in any event, I finally decided that it was that time, and I went down and enlisted in the Air Force. And of course I wanted to be a pilot. Well, that wasn't going to happen. You had to have a college education at a minimum, and even there they would look at you kind of cross-eyed, because there were so many guys trying to duck going into the Army and getting drafted that there was overabundance of young flyers. Crew member, yeah, but not a driver. In any case, I got in. I didn't get in. I actually couldn't get in. They told me to come back after Christmas after I filled out all the papers. When I went down a few days before Christmas, there was a half a dozen guys there. When I went down a couple days after New Year's, the post office was mobbed. Hundreds and hundreds of guys trying to get in to beat the draft, to enlist in the Air Force or the Navy or whatever. In any event, I wanted to go. And you say, well, why would you do? Because I thought that was where I ought to be. This was my country, and there's a war, and I ought to be involved. I went to see an attorney, Joe Cassini, who was a Democrat, didn't know the difference at the time, but he was involved in Democrat politics, and I guess my dad told me that this was a very good father of a close friend of my brother's, as a matter of fact. But the point is, I went to see him because I wanted to use political influence, not to get out, but to get in. And he looked at me and he said, I've never had anybody walk in here that wanted to get out, to get into the military, not get out. Well, whatever happened, and by the way, I'd quit my job, but during that period of time between right after Christmas and the middle of February, when I ultimately went in, I stacked cans in grocery store. I worked in a Red Castle making little 1-ounce hamburgers. Never was I out of work. Never. Always had a job, sometimes 2 jobs. Well, the wind-up was I wound up in the Air Force and all this sort of thing, and had no idea what an officer was. Not a clue what an officer was. Found out in a hurry. I also found out there was a program that you get out of the Air Force into the Army. If you wanted to go to OCS, you had 3 choices: infantry, artillery, or armored. And I immediately said, I knew now what an officer was. Nobody shared that with me. You'd say, how stupid can you be? Well, pretty stupid. Wind up was, I took all the tests and was told by the Army, okay, you're in. I chose artillery of the 3 choices. The day after they notified the Air Force that they were going to take me into the Army out of the Air Force, and I had done a whole bunch of intelligence school and whatever by this time, Next day, they put me on orders to go overseas, and the guy told me, we're not letting you go. You're going to stay in the Air Force, and you're going to stay in as a peasant. I don't think he used those words, but that's what he was telling me. And the wind-up is that's the way it came down. Went home on leave, out to California, to Camp Stoneman, and eventually on a troop ship. We were supposed to fly over and be crew members on this airplane, and the airplanes didn't get out of the factory when they made airplanes, so we took a ship over. Wound up after going through, I wish I had this seasick medicine that we're selling today. I'll tell you, Motion Ease, I'd have given $1 million if I had it for one of those. I was so sick, if they were selling arsenic, I'd have been the first guy in line. But after a couple of weeks, we wound up in Japan, and that was a whole other epiphany, because these were the guys that my brother and his cohorts were fighting in World War II. And I'm looking at them, they're all chip and paint, and I'm thinking, these are the guys that I was growing up as a kid. Dirty Jap was one word, and now they're on our side. And on the other side are the Chinese, who are our allies. And I made a wonderful epiphany then, or had one. I'll do what I got to do, but I'm not going to dislike them. More in a moment. I'm Bruce Williams. If you'd like to join us, however briefly, if you like what you're hearing, let me know. If you don't, that's okay too. 877-287-4964 or ask Bruce at brucewilliams.com. I'm trying to put, and I will certainly not go into the next hour, I'm going to talk about a lot of other things, but just to set the stage of how I got where I am, and I don't know really what made us different, but we sure as hell were different. I got to Japan December the 7th at midnight at a place called Ashiya, which was if you look at a map, it's down on Kyushu in southern Japan. Get there at midnight with a couple hundred guys, and we're standing out there with coal piles in every direction, cold, misty, and one or two light bulbs that were surrounded by this misty light. And they called off all but about a dozen names, and they said, you guys are going to go up now for breakfast, midnight chow. And tomorrow morning, you're going to get on an airplane, you're going to Korea, and with any kind of a break, you'll be home by next Christmas. Of course, that was predicated on the fact that you'd be alive next Christmas, and most of them were. Then you guys, that was a select group that I was in, about 12 of us, you are stationed here at Ashiya Air Force Base. You're going to be here for 2.5 years. 19 years old. Midnight. Cold, damp. Light bulbs surrounded by this kind of a fog. 2.5 years. He might just as well have said you're going to be executed. I mean, talk about depression. Well, the next day they put us in these semi-tents, and it was okay. The next day was sunny and bright, and life looked a little bit better. But there was no way in hell that I wanted to be there for 2.5 years. Some guys were happy. They liked Japan, and they liked the idea that it was not too much to worry about. But that was not me. Well, it took me a while to get settled in and to know what the score was. But I found out that only in our squadron, screw-ups went to Japan, went to Korea. You had to screw up. If you were a good troop and you behaved yourself and you did your job, everything was grand. Well, when I put that, it took me a while, I wasn't that bright, but to put that piece of intelligence together, on February the 16th, I took a swing at the first sergeant. Decked him as him. I didn't like the guy anyway. I took a swing at the first sergeant, knocked his butt down. I was fairly strong at that age. February 17th, got sent up to Fukuoka to get winter gear, clothing, and all that sort of stuff. And February 18th, my 20th birthday, they put us on an airplane and got to Korea. That's what I wanted, and I wound up there, and the point is that I wanted to be where the action was. long as they're going to have some stuff going on, I wanted to be there. And I extended 3 times. I could have come back to Japan 3 times, and I extended, because that's where it was happening. But what I'm trying to get to is that I don't think was unusual of my generation. Sure, there were guys that dodged the draft and guys that didn't want to do anything and whatever. But every one of us wanted to be where we were, where things were happening. And I've often marveled at so many young people, and I did as I was in my 30s, the hell no, I won't go. Because not only would I go, I wanted to go. And I admire the guys and gals that are in the military now that volunteer. And that's why I say I don't think it's a big deal to be a veteran. You know, people say, oh, they're a veteran, you ought to do this and that. I think that we should be grateful to our veterans. And I have no problem with GI Bills and that sort of thing. But when people call me and they start out, well, I'm a blank veteran, that's nice. And I thank you for your service. But I think we all ought to pay for the privilege of being in this wonderful country. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Hello there.
Hey, Bruce. I'm a couple days behind in my podcasts, and I just kind of got the news tonight and about your newest adventure you're going to be going on here. And
whatever that is, yes.
And I just wanted to take a little time out. I wanted to tell you that I first heard you on the radio when I was 17 years old, speaking of being a young man.
Mm-hmm.
And 17-year-old boys, they really don't take advice very much, and they don't listen to their elders too much. But when I first heard you, I really connected with you. And I just wanted to tell you that I think your combination of street smarts, no-nonsense approach, tenacity, and on top of all of that, seems like you're one of those guys that likes to take time and enjoy life along the way. I just wanted to call and tell you that I think all of those things make you a national treasure. And I just wanted to say I'm really going to miss you, pal.
I'm most appreciative, and it's folks like yourself that have made this thing worthwhile all these years, and I am just overwhelmed by the nice things you've had to say. I do wish you well, my friend. Thank you so much. I'm Bruce Williams. Little vignettes that affect our lives. When I was a junior, possibly, I was a junior in college, and I was loaned by a guy that I had worked for to another guy. And the fellow that he loaned me, he owed him a favor, and he said, I'll send this guy down, I think he can help you out. I guess I did. But nonetheless, the fellow that I was loaned to was tough as nails, and I will not get into some of his proclivities, and I'm not talking about social, I'm talking about business. But one day, he was giving me a particular ration of you-know-what, and it was about a very modest amount of money. Not that I stole or anything. It was on the expense account. I don't know what it was, $10 or something, which at the time was a lot of money, but nonetheless, he was micromanaging, and he was giving me a great deal of flack. And finally, I just lost it. I said, look, John, I know, you know I know, that you just got back from Las Vegas. I'd never been to Las Vegas at this point in my career. But I know you've been to Las Vegas, and I know you had 3 broads. Yeah, 'cause I heard the talk and whatever. And you lost a whole lot of dough, and you stuck around for an extra couple days. And I went on and talked about all of his proclivities and whatever. And he looked at me. He said, you're right. And he recounted all of the things that I just said, the ladies and the gambling and all that sort of thing. He said, the reason I can afford to go to Las Vegas, and he recounted it again, is because I don't let little twerps like you throw $10 away. You know, that stuck with me the rest of my life. not the proclivities, but the idea when you're the boss, if you watch the nickels and dimes, I don't mean beat up on people, but if you watch it and don't let people get foolish, you then can afford to make mistakes and maybe have some of these other proclivities. It's a lesson that I hope you've listened to and take notice. It'll help. I'm Bruce Williams. Well, hello there. How you doing? I hope well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome to my world. We talk to you and about you and with you and at you in all of the kinds of ways. We talk about what makes us what we are. And that is one of the things I'm kind of doing tonight. I had planned to do it maybe Thursday, but I'm going to continue. I will certainly take a call here and there. I am appreciative of what you have to say. If you still have a problem of some kind, you know I'll be very happy to attack that as well. But I did start to make up a list very quickly, and the list grew well beyond my expectation. So many people have asked me over the years, who are you and how did you get here? And my answer has always been, well, listen to the program and you'll hear little vignettes and snippets, put it all together eventually. I did write a book called Thanks for Asking, which I have not looked at since it was published. And as a consequence, some of these stories may be in there. I don't know. But the overwhelming majority of you have not read the book, so that's okay. But these are all things that have made me whatever it is that I am. In some cases, people have asked recently, well, what are some of the most interesting calls? And I haven't made a list of those at all, but I can think of a dozen offhand. And that's what we're going to do for the next couple of days. I'm just going to share some of this stuff with you, getting it all down on CD somehow or other, and possibly making that available to, I don't know. I'm going by hour. I've had relatives, family call me and friends, what are you going to do? And I don't know the answer to that. I know damn well that I'm going to be busy, because otherwise I would die. The idea of sitting down or playing golf or the rest of that, all very well for someone else. I'm not criticizing. But it would destroy me. I've been working since I was, 10 years old, something of that order, steadily. And I intend to continue as long as I'm able. I don't know what it will be. If you got a red-hot business proposition, send me an email. Who knows? Maybe we'll get together. I don't know. I'm not going to make any decisions until after our cruise, which finishes up on Palm Sunday. So until then, it's hour by hour, day by day. And there is still room on the cruise, by the way, for maybe another 3 or 4 cabins. At least there was yesterday at this time. Portland, Oregon, what's on your mind?
Good evening, Bruce. Wrapping up a couple of topics that you've covered over the years. I don't know if you saw the news today, but the NATO forces off of Somalia sank what they thought was one of the motherships of the pirates that have been attacking ships over there.
Yeah, I saw that they also, in fact, I wrote down in my notes, which I probably won't do anything with, I said, this is almost like a gentleman's game they're playing. They took the crew off. They didn't sink it before they took the crew off, and they sent them back to Somalia. And, of course, when the Somalians take over a ship, they aren't interested in killing the crew or whatever. We're going to work out the niceties of the ransom, and you pay us the money, and everybody will be in good shape and fat and sassy and continuing on their way. So what the hell way is this to run a pirate operation? Put them back on the ship and let them go home, and they in turn apparently go out of their way not to injure anybody because all they want is the dough.
Well, the last time we talked, the Israeli commandos had been on board the one cruise ship and fired on the attacking pirates, and at least they're doing something.
So I would agree to that, but that was my first... I'm trying to think if I can even find my stupid notes. Because when I read, I make notes to myself for obvious reasons. I said pirates, quote, a gentleman's game. And it is. I mean, now there's a bad business to go into. You knock off a couple of oil ships, and you grab $20 million, and you move on to something else.
Just put it in the bank, put it in the stock market, whatever.
Boy, oh boy.
One other follow-up. The discussion has been over the years about cell phones on airplanes and the problems and issues with that. And I came across an article just this last weekend where it was saying that the problem wasn't so much with the interference with the airplane, but at altitude, the cell phones are tapping too many of the cell towers.
Oh, absolutely. That's not news. That's 15 years.
It's just I've not heard it discussed in conjunction with that argument.
Yeah, but they've overcome that, you see. That has nothing to do with anything now. Because what they are going to do is when you use your cell phone on the airplane, it will then go to a transmitter on the airplane and be directed.
Yeah.
And how they can keep your signal from going down, let's say you're at 36,000. What is that? 5 miles?
At least
6 miles. Yeah, but it's not very far. Straight down, and the signal can screw up a whole bunch of towers, but I think they'll probably be able to overcome that technologically.
Well, if they are able to isolate it on the plane, much like they're doing on the cruise ships, God forbid.
How do they isolate it on a cruise ship?
I'm not sure how they isolate it, but they've got a satellite system on the cruise ships which allows your regular cell phone to be used while the ship is at sea.
Oh yeah,
at a tune of $250 a minute.
I don't think it's that expensive because I used mine when it was off the coast of China on the cruise ship in November, and it wasn't a big deal, but you had to be careful which way you used it. I had an iPhone at the time, which I got rid of, because if you had it in the wrong mode, then you got up to about $15 a minute.
The last time we were on a ship, which was about a year ago, it was running on cell usage. It was $2.50 a minute, and if you were doing texting, it was like a nickel or a dime. But
yeah, but the thing is, with an iPhone, there's another mode on there.
Okay.
I didn't know that. If you have it in the wrong mode, it's always on roam.
Oh, that could get spendy.
And it could get hundreds of dollars. But I learned how to turn it off. See that?
Anyway, I want to thank you for years of entertainment, a lot of common sense, and some sage advice. And appreciate all that you've done, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks on the cruise.
Oh, my goodness, you're going with us. What's your first name?
Tom.
Tom, I will look for... Tom, what's your last... Are you a chiropractor?
I am.
Oh, of course I know who you are. Why don't you identify yourself, you rascal? I will look forward to seeing you, Tom, in a couple of weeks, truly. And you bring your phone so I don't have to pay for it, okay? And see, I got the thing on the airplane conked. When you start talking on your cell phone, I'm going to drop it right into and screw up my Bacardi on the rocks, but I'll just drop your phone accidentally or spill it into your... Fix your damn telephone talking on the airplane. I do wish you well, Tom. Our telephone number 877-287-4964. There's all kinds of stuff on my little help list here. And one question that was asked is tell us some of your most memorable calls. And one was from a long time ago. I was broadcasting from my home in New Jersey after the airplane incident. And at that time, unlike tonight, I'm in my home. I don't even have a dog up here tonight, for crying out loud. This is me and you. But at that time, you had to have an engineer, an assistant engineer, a producer, a gopher, a house full of people to do this program. Either we've improved or unimproved, depending on your point of view. But in any event, I got a phone call from St. Louis, Missouri. And it was a guy was talking about committing suicide. Now, I'm sure that there are people that would take this very lightly and whatever. I'm not one of them. And I kept him on the phone. During the commercial breaks, we talked and all that sort. And the engineer was there, so we get all that done without a big deal. And we finally sent somebody over to, I talked to him about the sanctity of life. I remember that conversation. I talked to him about how stupidly in landing an airplane and being had too damn much pride, because it was clear to me at that time, and it's certainly clear even now, what was it, 27 years ago, whatever it was, that I should have just pounded the plane into the concrete when I ran on a runway, ground looped it, probably bent it up a little bit, certainly bent the prop, maybe collapsed the gear, and that would have been the end of it. But no, I was too proud. I didn't want to whack up the airplane, so I tried to take off and abort the landing and hit a tree doing 160, and the rest of it's history. But I told him the story. I said, look, I could have thrown away my life. And I said, I know you got problems. There are people all over the world that would trade with you in a heartbeat. There's somebody sitting out there listening to this conversation that has a fatal disease. And we talked about that sort of thing until finally, I even remembered his name, but I won't mention it. The guy from the radio station went to this man's house, and that was the end of that. I hope, influenced him some way. But the point is that I was talking about how important life is. I was going to use the word sacred, but maybe that's not applicable, but important. Okay? In any event, I got a call from a lady sometime later, and she said, you saved my life. Now, that's a throwaway line. You saved my life. I didn't have that tuna fish sandwich. But I said, well, thank you very much. He said, no, you don't understand. I never heard of you or never heard of your program. But life was just not worth living. She said, I drove my car to the top of the highest, I think she said bluff, word that wasn't really real familiar to me, in California, meaning at top of a mountain of some kind. I put the car in gear, and I was going to drive it off the edge. And here's this guy talking on the radio. And it was you. Never heard of you, don't know what you do did nothing. But she said you were talking about the sanctity of life and how, and I recounted the things that I just talked to you about a moment ago. And she just said, I decided after hearing that conversation, I'd give it one more shot. And I put the car in reverse and backed away from the edge of the bluff or whatever it was and came home. And I'm alive today because of that conversation. That's pretty heavy stuff, campers. You see, I came to realize more than I did at the time, and I still realize how much people in this business can influence someone's life who we will never know. And a certain amount of responsibility goes with that. Some of my colleagues have forgotten. Should you wish to jump on the party line, you know you're welcome at 877-287-4964. I'm just sharing little vignettes of things that I jotted down right at the top of my head that have made a difference in my life. So many of you asked, where the heck did you come from? Recognizing I started this whole broadcast thing in the second half of my life. On the other side of that, could I have done it in the first half? Unlikely not, because a certain amount of life's experience is necessary to do whatever it is we do here. And as was observed to me, and this is not an original thought, but I believe it to be true. I hadn't thought about it. And this is self-congratulatory, I suppose, when a guy said, you couldn't have done this when you were 20. And he was certainly right about that. But he said most of the guys doing these programs today couldn't have done them ever, as you did, because you did it without a computer. Everything you did came out of your head, as opposed to having somebody tap, 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 looking up the answers or looking up data and whatever while they chattered on a little bit. And I believe that to be true, that not too many of the people doing these types of shows today, and I guess because they are computer illiterate and that's the way they think. But I don't know that they could have done it just extemporaneously. We'll never know. St. Louis, hello there.
Hello, Bruce. It's your friend Bob. How are you?
I am just fine, Robert. Looking forward to seeing you in the cruise.
Just a few days.
Yes, indeed, but I'm not letting you buy all those dinners, so forget it. I'm
So
not
I
going to
know
let you go broke.
you're going to get a ton of calls, but one of the things that Beth, I got the chance to speak with her the other day, got me thinking about how you've influenced people's lives. And so I sat down and kind of made a list of the 5 things that I've learned from my Uncle Bruce over the years. And I thought I'd rattle them off real quick.
I'm sitting down, Bob, so it's okay. Go ahead.
So whether you're buying real estate, selling real estate, or writing up a will, get yourself a lawyer.
Well, we can agree on that one. Go ahead.
Umbrella insurance policies are the best and cheapest peace of mind that you can buy.
Okay.
If you hate your heirs, leave them undivided property. The last one,
I like that.
And the last one's kind of a group, the things that I've learned to enjoy in life because of Bruce. Before I got a chance to go on the cruise several years ago, I'd never been on a cruise. Now cruising is one of my favorite ways to travel. I've learned the joys of pork roll because I did not grow up on the East Coast, but I surely enjoy it and order it way too many times, as a matter of fact, but delicious stuff.
Yeah, we tried to get the permission of the cruise ship to take it on the ship.
I know.
They got ballistic.
Yep. And the last and one of the most important things I've learned to enjoy is I've got some Boston Terriers here sitting at my feet, and they're the best dogs I've ever had in my life, and I really appreciate you turning me on to them.
Well, that part, you and I are in solid agreement. There's 2 kinds of dogs, Boston Terriers and the rest of them.
Yep. And I don't know what I'm going to do with my evenings and things going forward. You have no idea how much I'll miss you. And I guess real quick, the last thing I'd like to say is there's someone to talk to, someone to care. Someone will always be there. Tune in, Talknet.
We care.
We care. You take care.
That was our original theme, and it was far and away the best theme. Unfortunately, the young fellow who wrote it at the time was very happy to get it on to NBC because it was a credential, and he was just a young guy. 10 years later, he was an extraordinarily successful young guy, where his name was worth more than ours. And the powers that be at NBC were not prepared to pay what he asked, which was not unreasonable in my opinion. And so 10 years later, that went away. But and you know, I still know the words clearly. I just demonstrated that, right?
And I didn't sing it to you. I almost did.
Right. But if you put $100, $1,000, whatever, on my desk right now, I could not whistle the theme song we use today. It's just it's just so forgettable.
No, it's that little hit you do before you come on. That sound I'll always recognize for the rest of my life. But the music's just kind of music.
Well, I'll tell you, I have somebody you can ask a question of.
Mm-hmm.
It's Kevin, and you know who Kevin is, do you not?
I do.
He's the one who selected this theme song. You can ask him why, because I never wanted to hurt his feelings.
I'll have to bring it up when I see him.
He'll be on a cruise, as you well know. Bob, I'll look forward to seeing you in a scant 2 weeks plus.
Yes, sir. You take care.
Take good care. Bob has been on, I don't know how many cruises, to Caribbean, to Alaska, and whatever. As he said, he wasn't a cruiser. Now it's his favorite vacation. It is also mine. My difficulty is that I'm starting to truly run out of places that a cruise ship will take me. I've done Alaska so many times. I suggested to Susie maybe we ought to go to Alaska this summer. We'll see the look on her face of all the things we don't need to do. Because, we've done a ton of Alaska cruises. I would like to go to Antarctica, more just for the idea to say that I've been there. But, of course, that would be the wrong time of the year in the summertime because that's winter time in Antarctica. I like to go down and get acquainted with the penguins and the rest of that. And I would like to take a cruise down a river in Egypt. But I'm starting to run out of places to go. I'm willing to listen to suggestions. And you can go with us. I'm Bruce Williams. At some of your requests, I have elected to comment for today, maybe tomorrow, I'm not sure how many days, about things that have influenced me to be whatever it is I am, programs or callers that were most unusual and some of which I'm very grateful for, others I'm laughing at, and in short, little things that all of us have in our lives that contribute to who we are. So many of you asked, who am I? And I really have never answered. It may be appropriate this last week. Our telephone number, 877-287-4964. Email, askbruce@brucewilliams.com. Eastport, Maine. Hello there. How are you?
Hey, Bruce. I've been a listener for about 15 years, and I just wanted to call in and say goodbye to you.
Well, thank you so very much. I had a very nice email, which I don't have it in front of me, from one of the legislators in Maine yesterday.
Yes, I heard you read that on the air last night. That was very nice.
Indeed. Well, he asked that I read it, and I was very complimented that somebody in that capacity would be listening to whatever it is we do here.
I also think you have a kind of a curious mind, and that will be missed. I don't think enough people in your business have that.
Well, there's no question. That's not I don't mean this as a compliment to myself. I am inordinately curious. I've got to count the steps when I walk up them. It's as simple as that. And I can usually remember 20 years later how many steps. In fact, I was talking to my friend Zach. I've only been in the studios in Colorado once, and that was only for about an hour, a quick trip out and back. And I only walked up the stairs once, and I said, I'll bet you I can tell you how many there are. I missed by one. It was like, well, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, that's right. I'm curious, and I try to encourage others to be curious, not to be, a little box walking down. Let your eyes wander. Take it all in. There's a lot of stuff happening out there, and I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Yes.
Well, I thank you very much for your call, Tiger. To be continued. Well, there's a whole bunch of these little things, and I intended. Matter of fact, I stopped at the store today. I got a little irritated. I wonder if this irritates you. I went in to get some index cards in one of the big chain drugstores. I was trying to think of the easiest place to go, given the fact that Biscuit was with me, and I don't like leaving him in the car for extended periods of time, whatever. So there I'm thinking, oh yeah, well there's a drugstore I never go to, but it's right on the way. I'll stop there. Get the index cards. No big deal. What? I actually found them in a hurry. $1.99. I'm in pig heaven. Then I get to the checkout counter. There's just two people. One of them can't be all bad because she had a dog in her shopping cart. A little dog. I didn't know you could take them into the drugstore like that, but nonetheless, she had the little dog in the truck. But what a production. First, she had to get out her, whatever it is, let's call it an ABC drugstore card. I guess you get, well, I inquired, because the guy asked me, I said, no, all I have is money, I want to pay and get out of here. Oh, you get free coupons, and on this $20 sale, I don't know how much she's going to gain. Then she had to get out some coupons and display. Well, this whole transaction must have taken 5 or 6 minutes for her to spend this money. But more important, I'm standing there chomping at the bit. I want to get the hell out with my index cards and maybe get some work done. And I'm impatient by nature. Okay, so then there's these other two ladies, and matter of fact, when they walked in, I stepped aside and let them go in the door before me. What a major mistake that was. So they beat me to the checkout counter, at a photo finish. So they're standing there, and they're talking. And just about the time when this woman finally, she has to put everything into her purse, and she has to go into her purse and find her car keys, and then put her change away, and all of this production, because only one checkout counter. These two, they walk up, mother and daughter, I don't know, who knows what they were, and they were buying a lady's personal product, okay? And just as she's handing this only one purchase, wait a minute, I found one over here with a coupon. So now the second one has to trot over and take the one back. She's going to put it back on her shelf because the one she found on a shelf had some kind of a coupon on it. So she comes back with that, and we go through the same routine. She's got the drugstore card and this and that and the other thing. And finally, the guy said, oops, I didn't give you credit for the drugstore card. And the whole thing had to start over again. I was there almost 15 minutes behind these two women. And I said to the guy, he said, "Do you have a so-and-so card?" I said, "No, all I have is $3 here, $2.99 plus tax. Let me pay you." Oh, he said, "Well, you should have a card. Can I get?" "No, thank you very much." Oh, they both paid by credit card, too. That was another part of the transaction. There ought to be some kind of a rule that you gotta, anything under $5 or something in that order, you gotta pay cash. Is it necessary to have it entirely a plastic economy? I'm in the credit card business. But for goodness sakes. But Mr. Biscuit was waiting and life went on. But I just think they ought to have some kind of a line where you walk through, no credits, no debits, just money, and let you get on your way. Syracuse, New York. Hell, now there goes the testiness in me. Syracuse, hello there.
Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Doing just fine, thank you very much. You know, it's tough. It's kind of a tough week, I won't lie to you.
Yeah, you're not kidding, and it's tough for us too. You're like an old friend that's been around, and we really appreciate all your information, everything you've given us.
Thank you.
I've been listening to you for years, and hey, I just wanted I wanted to ask you a couple questions, but I want to read off a poem here that I wrote for you. Let me start here if I could. Just a short one. We know a great man named Bruce Williams. Who's helped many people by the millions. He's given great advice while always being nice, and boy, how we surely will miss him.
That's very, very nice. I appreciate the thoughts.
Yeah, I really wrote that up.
That was very nice of you.
Hey, you're welcome, Bruce.
You said you had a question.
Yeah. Actually, some of the other times that you've talked, I've kind of made notes up and meant I'm calling you there. And I noticed one time you said years back in the 70s you met Howard Cosell at a party.
Yeah, I met him at the Tavern on the Green.
Tavern on the Green, yeah. And how was the guy? I mean, I was a fan of Howard Cosell, and I always liked that he always told it the way it was, and you kind of actually in ways similar to the way you are. I mean, you always give advice and you tell things the way they were. And I was wondering how was Howard? Was he was a good guy to talk with?
To be completely candid, like a couple of other people I met, it was very much toward the end of his career.
Oh, yeah.
And he wasn't all that loquacious. He was sitting at a table, and I was introduced to him, and he and his wife, I assumed it was his wife, I'm thinking about that now, but it must have been. But, it was not at a time 10 years early. That had to be in the early 80s, because I started at NBC at 81. And if you got a computer handy, you could find out when Mr. Cosell left us. But it probably was in, I would guess, 83, maybe 84, someplace in there. And so, hey, Zach, take a look at Howard Cosell real quickly and see when he passed away. And I may be doing him an incredible disservice, for which I would sincerely apologize, but it seemed to me that it was toward the end of his career. Someone else who I met toward the end of his career was Bob Hope. And while he was on stage, he was in super form. But as soon as he came off stage and I was backstage, because doesn't matter what I was doing. 95 Cosell passed away?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
He said they said they looked it up, 95. Well, I know this was no later than 85, so then maybe I did him a disservice, but he didn't seem like he was at the top of his game. Or maybe, but I won't speculate.
Well, I know you've talked before about, I know you've spent some time talking about sports, and I agree with you about a lot of times how sports are overblown, and about how franchises, they take cities at ransom and try to get taxpayer money out to get bigger stadiums built. And Howard Cosell's written a couple of good books on that.
Oh, he was something else. He did that Monday Night Football with no notes.
That's right, yeah.
He did that entire recap of all those games on Monday Night Football off the top of his head.
That's right, yeah.
And I remember one of the things that some taverns were doing, and I'd have done the same thing. It was a great stunt. They used to have contests at halftime, and whoever won the contest got to throw a brick at the television and smash it. And then I'm sure Cassell must have, I'd get a hell of a kick out of it if that was me. But, I mean, they had these contests, because he was what kind of guy you liked or disliked. And he certainly had his detractors. But they used to have these contests and then smash the it was obviously a cheap television set they bought. But it's the American dream. I thank you so very, very much. I'm Bruce Williams. I'm having a pleasant time. I hope you're enjoying it. Reminiscing a little bit about things that have influenced me, some funny things that have happened to me, where and how I got where I am and where I'm going, I don't know. It's always life is to be continued. Telephone number is 877-287-4964. One thing that is certain, if I had the same difficulties with my children that my mother and dad had with me, there sure as hell would have been 5 kids in the Williams family. That much you can believe. My mom must have been at least a candidate for sainthood, because the report cards that I brought home for the better part of my elementary school and high school days, to say they were uncomplimentary, just constant reports of failure, would be an underestimation. It really would be. I flunked skipping. How can you flunk skipping? In kindergarten or first grade, I actually flunked skipping. My mother had to sign. The reason I know all of this is because going through some of the stuff my mom left behind, she kept my report cards. And let me tell you, I ain't going to show them to anybody. They were just absolutely testimony to somebody who just was never meant to go to school, or almost never meant to go to school. I mean, when I went to elementary school at Marshall Street School in South Orange, New Jersey, I had the report cards. And that would make me, 8, 9 years old, probably through 10, something of that kind. And just no matter what handwriting, well, we all know that. Spelling, he couldn't spell his own name, and so on and so forth. And, that there was, we would all, we'll suggest you do this, Mrs. Williams, and suggest you do that. Well, she sure tried her best. But with all those suggestions, there was not much improvement in my grades. There was, however, this is retrospective, there was one area, just one, I think I might have got through PE or whatever they called it in those days, recess or some such thing. But there was an area that I was consistently overachieving. One, serious. I could read. All throughout all these different teachers and whatever, when it came to reading, I was reading at 7th grade level when I was in 2nd grade, that sort of thing. I just was a natural reader, and I have read I remember one of the things that Mom and Dad would give me for Christmas, because it was something I really wanted. And I was, athletic enough, as most children are. But the one thing that I remember, I'll bet there's somebody out there who's 109 would remember Leo Edwards. Leo Edwards. And the Jerry Todd books. So these were like the Hardy Boy stories and whatever. They were just ground out by the dozens by these authors. And I don't know what they sold for, but I had them all. And the Jerry Todd stuff I remember, so I can even recite most of the titles, which I will certainly not do. But I'll bet there's somebody out there that read Jerry Todd, and Leo Edwards was his pen name of all these great little stories. But I used to read. I get my hands on anything, I would read it. And I believe that above all the other things that I tried to do, and I was always a hustler. I was at it 10 years old, doing stuff that you weren't supposed to do, and I will maybe talk about some of those things as well, because it was me. That's what I did, and like it or not, that's how I developed into whatever I am. But the point is, that was the one thing, and I find it so disquieting that today's generation of kids and young adults, many of them, simply don't know how to read. They don't. They don't want to read. And to my mind, it is the one thing that can set you aside. People say, well, how do I learn to invest? Read. Read the appropriate magazines. Spring for a newspaper. Yeah, read the financial section. It may not be much, but it's a lot cheaper than going to college, taking courses. Read Money Magazine. Frankly, I don't think Time and Newsweek are anything even close to what they were some years ago. And if you read them, I think you'd agree that they have, and that's a matter of economics and advertising and the rest of it. But even at that, those magazines and Forbes and the rest of them, you really ought to at least try. I say to one of my kids, will say something once in a while, I said, did you read the Wall Street Journal? I bought you a subscription. Because there's so much there if you learn how to read it. So if I had to impress you with one skill that you might want to pass on to your kids and improve your own, it's a 4-letter word that can be used in polite society. I'm Bruce Williams. Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Hello there. Well, son of a gun, Lebanon, you disappeared into the ether, and I am sorry there. Well, we had the phone lines drop out during the first hour. They were my line. I have no idea why, and now the lines just now decided to disappear into the wild blue yonder. But we're going to get it back in a very short time. I want to tell you a little bit about a guy, another who influenced me a great deal. I started buying, he passed away about a year ago. I started buying flowers from Fritzie Muller when I was 12 or 13 years old, in corsages and mistletoe, which I sold first myself from door to door, and then my friend Bob and I recruited little kids, 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders, honest to God. We recruited them, and they certainly found us in a hurry when the word got around, to sell corsages and bags of mistletoe from door to door. Mistletoe was $0.25 a bag. Nobody sold mistletoe in bags and boxes. It came loose. Fritz was taking advantage of these young kids, just barely making it into their teens, selling us Texas mistletoe, but most of the berries had fallen off. We, in turn, got little bags, and I won't get into that, I don't have the time, plastic bags and red Scotch tape, put the mistletoe and then a handful of loose berries into the bag, sealed it up with tape, and told everybody, never open a bag, the berries are poisonous, but this way you hang the whole thing up, and they won't infect your children or your pets. And it worked. It really worked. But Fritzie was sent home from school when he was in 3rd grade. This is close to 100 years ago. Teacher said, Mrs. Muller, he's a nice boy, but keep him down on the farm. And he was one of a lot of kids. Well, maybe she missed just by a little bit. Fritz wound up owning one of the biggest flower operations in New Jersey. He had the most gorgeous home you can imagine, one of the ones that people come to from dozens of miles away to see, decorated at Christmas time. When the cost of one kind of flower was too much, he bought the whole farm in Florida so he could produce them at the right price, and then he bought the factory that made the buckets that they shipped the flowers in. Yeah, Mrs. Muller, your 3rd grader did okay for himself. He passed away in his 90s. Made a big impression on me. I'm Bruce Williams. Well, how are we doing, huh? I hope well. I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome to my world. We talk about our world. And tonight and the next couple of nights, we're going to talk about a few things that perhaps we haven't talked about before. I hope you'll stay with us. So many people over the years have said, what makes you what you are? What is your background and so forth? And my answer has always been, just stick around, listen. I drop things in once in a while that seem appropriate, and you'll get a picture sooner or later. Well, sooner is gone and later is almost gone, and it occurred to me that there are a lot of unanswered questions that maybe I would share with you to maybe give some flavor as to where I came from, what I think, what I believe, who influenced me. Maybe I've influenced one or two people during my career. So I've been telling these little vignettes, and I started making a list, and the whole list probably didn't take 10 minutes to make. I just came off the top of my head. Doing the math, it would very easily take 8 to 10 hours to explain each of these. I'm thinking, gee, there would be a book in there someplace, except for one thing, I hate writing. So I don't think any book is going to come out of it. Yeah, you never know if I'm just totally bored to death. But I've been sharing some of these stories. They're not particularly profound, not going to change anybody's life, but they're things that have been meant, in many cases, a lot to me. Maybe not to anyone else, but I thought I would share them. Have a neat email here. If you're a regular listener, this will be meaningful. If you're not, well, what can I tell you? It says, Dear Bruce, I'm a recent college dropout. I think I just bit off more than I could chew when I took a 10-hour-a-week job in the dining hall while taking 9 whole credits last semester. My parents were paying for my schooling, and I've yet to tell them I dropped out of school for fear they will stop sending me money. I was able to get a partial refund on my tuition, which I immediately used to purchase a timeshare at a Virginia ski resort. Next year, I'm planning on using the money my parents give me for school for a down payment on a house. I figure if I don't use a lawyer and skip the house inspection, I can save a few $100s. I'm living as cheaply as possible. In fact, I have had hot dogs with ketchup for dinner every night this week. If I can keep my parents from knowing that I've dropped out of school for another 2 years, I stand to pocket a cool $40,000. Do you have any advice on what else I could be doing with this well-deserved windfall? Well, Trent, you're very profound. And he says, P.S., I'm going to miss you like hell. I really appreciate that, because he touched on so many things. It's obvious that Trent listens regularly, and I am very pleased to have you be part of my audience, Guy. And I will keep this one, because particularly I will show it to my good friend on the cruise, Bob Henke, because that's my wife's father, who repeatedly fouls up hot dogs with ketchup on them, when everyone who's from the civilized world knows ketchup goes on hamburgers, mustard goes on hot dogs, and anybody who violates that is certainly going to have a certain character flaw, but that's another program. The telephone number, by the way, if for whatever reason you would like to jump on the party line, 877-287-4964. There are a whole bunch of things on my list, and I'm confident that some of these were covered in my book. Thanks for asking. Because I haven't read it in years and don't have any intention to. If there's a repetitiveness there, I do apologize. On the other side of that, the overwhelming majority of you never read that, so it's new to you. And if for those guys that have seen it before, I do apologize. Austin, hello there.
Hey, Bruce, how are you tonight?
I am just fine, thank you.
I want to tell you what an honor it is to speak to you. And I know you're going to get a lot of calls like this over these next couple of days, but I've been listening to you since I was 13 in 1982.
13? That's called, my friend, I've said this before, that's child abuse.
Well, my father made me. I'd go to work with my dad on Saturdays, and we'd listen to you all day out of WLS in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I became hooked from then on, and then I've caught you. You know, I'm in Austin now, and you're not on the air here anymore. So then I went to the satellite, and then I went to the iPod. So I want you to know how much you will be greatly missed.
Well, I'm really appreciative of that, because I realize when I left the major networks, you had to be in one of them to get cleared. That's what it came down to. Then it's just the way life is. I was fortunate enough to be on 90 stations, which is a lot of people would think is okay, and it was okay. But what I'm getting at is that the WLSs of the world, unless you're connected with a major network, the overwhelming majority will never say hello to you.
Right.
But that's another story. It was a wonderful thing. While it lasted, I had the opportunity to be number one in the world at what I did for a while, and I have no complaints.
Well, Bruce, I want to tell you I'm also such an honor to speak to you. I'm in business for myself, and I attribute a lot of that to what I've learned from you over the years.
Well, you're very generous, but I got a feeling it's because you broke your back.
A little bit of both.
Okay, I'll buy that. How do you like Austin?
I love it.
Do you?
Yeah, I've been here for almost 20 years now.
We had a saloon there for a while. We owned
Piano
a bar?
In
Austin, yes.
Yes.
And it would seem like a very tough town to do business in for us. It just seemed like a very tough town. That there was that one main street there, 6th Avenue, was it?
Yeah, 6th Street.
And 6th Street, and so many amateurs owned bars, and as soon as business was not what they wanted, they kept cutting the price. So they're selling drinks for $1 and whatever. And I said to my partners immediately, there's no point in hanging around this town, because there's no way in the world you can make any money when people are selling $1 drinks.
Sure, yeah.
And I was correct in that. The observation was correct, that that's one of the things that many amateurs, as you must know from your business, the first thing they do is, if things don't quite go the way they want, is the first thing they cut price.
Yes.
And that's probably the last thing you ought to do.
Bad for all of us. Yes.
Right. Well, it's bad for themselves, too. There are other economies that you make before you start cutting price. But that's just another business observation. But you, as a business person, what do you do? What kind of business?
I own a power wash business.
Oh, my goodness. I know. I would use guys like, well, you're a perfect example then. There's a limit to how much you can reduce the price and still make money.
Exactly.
And so, but your amateur competitor who just bought a couple of machines, well, I'll knock $10 off the price, but he doesn't realize it, but he's digging his own grave.
Right, and I've seen it many times.
I'm sure you have. As have I.
Sure.
Have I. Well, I thank you very, very much for your call. It was very generous of you. I'm glad we could stay with you, or you would stay with me for so long. Last night, I think it was last night or night before, one of the two, I got a nice email from a fellow from Pittsburgh, the Burg, where we also had a saloon for quite a while. But he wasn't living in Pittsburgh. He was listening to KQV, our very loyal affiliate in Pittsburgh, but he was listening on the Internet. He is a professor in Singapore. And I'm constantly, and I know right now there's somebody listening in one of the Singapores of the world, or Bangkok, or Tahiti, or Berlin, or whatever. And I realize, and it's intellectually, I'm aware of that. I don't have a problem with that. But when you think about it, that you can be sitting here ruminating and just having, for me, a good time, chatting with people, and somebody can be listening halfway around the world to a little amateur like me. Well, I'm not an amateur, but you know what I'm getting to. Halfway around the world. We have a very nice young fellow who listens and calls from South Korea. Doesn't always, regularly doesn't agree with me, but that's okay. I don't have a problem with people who don't agree with me. Matter of fact, I kind of enjoy the people who don't agree with me. If that's you, let's hear from you. Our telephone number is 287-4964, 877-287 4964. I know that some of these stories that I mentioned, these little vignettes that are, my what's the term I'm searching for? My memory is nudged by these little notes I've made to myself. And they're no big deal, other than for my own recollection. And I'm thinking of the hustling that somebody else could have done. I was talking a couple of hours ago about my little episodes in Korea and I've, okay, so I'm older than dirt because you couldn't be older. You had to be old as dirt to have been in the Korean thing, and I was there during the festivities. Matter of fact, I won't get into that. I was there for quite a while. I extended because I enjoyed it. But one of the things I did with a fellow named Harry Bruns, who was from Iowa, and one of the few guys that I know of that's still alive. An awful lot of them they're dead. They've lived their lives and they're no longer with us. But I think Harry is still with us. I talked to Harry about a year ago. One of the things that you couldn't get for whatever reason where we were, and we were sort of mobile depending on what the Chinese were up to, was Coca-Cola. There wasn't any Coke around. It was available, clearly, because I found it, but Coke was difficult to come by. So Harry and I went into the Coke business. We used to buy it by the truckload for cash, and I'm not even sure how I made that connection. I mean, I know where I got the trucks and stuff. That was easy to work out. But we used to buy Coke by the truckload. I'll tell you a little bit about that because anybody could have done it, but we did. In any case, Harry Bruns and I bought Coke. The big problem was getting ice, cool it, because most of the ice was harvested from the river, and of course the river was the separation point between the two armies, and frequently dead people wound up in the water and dead animals and whatever. So the ice was not too sanitary, and even I had some scruples. But we finally found an ice house but I don't even know what the source of their water was, because water in itself at that time was questionable. If you didn't know its source, you sure put something in it to purify it. But in any event, we bought ice, put our Coke into the in this 55-gallon drum, half filled with sand, so we could reach into it, and ice, and we sold Coke. My morbid fear at the time, we used to run over to Incheon and pick up a whole truckload of Coke at $1.20 a case, a nickel a bottle, and bring it back. I mean, and I had a pass which allowed me to go everywhere, which is a whole other story. No matter what was going on, I could go there because I had this little document that said I was on some type of an intelligence mission. But nonetheless, my biggest fear during that entire stupid little episode we had over there was that the Chinese or their North Korean brethren would pick that night to decide to infiltrate or take over the area when I had a whole truckload of Coke out there. My merchandise would go. Mercifully, that never happened. But that was my worry. As a 20-year-old entrepreneur, that was my concern, that those rascals would pick the night that I just brought over a full 6-by of Coke to come over and take over. So the merchant thinks. 877-287-4964. That graduated into a house poker game and some other activities, which, if anybody wants to know, ask. Seminole, Florida. Hello there.
Hey, Bruce. Been a long-time listener. Want to thank you for all your advice over the years. And I've been in the flower business all my life, and I know several times throughout that time you've always mentioned us like late on a Valentine's evening or Christmas Eve or something like that.
And what are you, in the retail business?
Yes, yes.
Well, you got the big non-holiday coming up, the next one. It used to be a wonderful holiday, and now it's
Easter,
that's right.
Yeah.
I remember when Easter...
Sure. It's probably the only declining holiday there is.
But it's declined down to nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, the supermarkets and the peddlers have pretty much made that happen. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I had a couple of things. I think I started listening to you. I think you were on WEEI in Boston, because I'm from that area. And I never called, but like I said, I do appreciate all your advice, and I pass it along to my sons in many cases. Mm-hmm. I remember you once, or several times, said that you'd put up $1 million. If somebody would put up $1 million, you'd go on the road in a truck for a year and make $50,000, and I think that was like in 1980 money.
That story is about the most repeated and with a whole bunch of error. But there was some. First of all, I never said $1 million. Let's start with that. Okay. The $1 million wager I wanted to make, when people kept telling me, including many members of academia, that, we understand what you're telling us, but you can't tell people they can go to college and work full-time and get decent grades. And you said you can go to law school and work full-time. And finally one guy called me from Texas, and I said, do you really believe what you're telling me, Professor? You sound like a nice guy. You're telling me that, and this is 10, 12 years ago, something, maybe longer, I don't remember, not relevant. Anyway, he said, you just can't do that. You cannot go, it's just too involved going to law school and the rest of that, and you just can't do it. I said, you really believe that, Prof? Oh, I said, well, you got a lot of friends, academics, yeah, most of them do okay, yep. Do they believe? Just to a man, they know better. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll put up $1 million. You put up $1 million, and we'll put it in escrow somewhere, and I'll go to law school in 3 years and graduate and pass the bar the first time. What do you say? That was the end of that conversation. Now, that's a wager I would have liked to have accepted, you see, because I know damn well I'd have had to work a lot harder than maybe another guy, because I would have kept the show and all the rest of the stuff that I do, but I was thoroughly persuaded that I could go to law school, and there's only one school in the area, it's Stetson, so I'd have to get admitted to Stetson, because I wasn't going to move, and I didn't say Yale or Columbia. I'm not totally stupid. But as to the truck thing, I'll set the stage, and if you want to hang on for a minute, I'll tell you what I said was, when people complained, and I can't get a job, I can't do this, I can't do that, I always ask, are you healthy? Yeah, but, there's no... I said, I can take an old truck. I didn't say a dump truck or a pickup. I said an old truck, and go anywhere in the country that is a decent-sized city and make $40,000 the first year. That was my statement, and I stand by it, and I'll tell you why. I'm Bruce Williams. I'm chatting with a friend in Seminole, Florida. He is in the florist business, which means you can't be all bad, but you can't be very smart either, because it's a very tough... I'm only kidding, you know that.
I'll agree with that one.
Tough enterprise, though, today. But in any event, he was asking, of course, and I understand where the details can get flurry, but what I've said over the years, and when I get impatient with people who tell me I can't find a job, I haven't had a job in a year and a half, and yada, yada, yada. I read a thing today, which I'm probably not going to get into, about a guy that is 49 years old, and he's working in this town where the factories are closing up and so on and so forth. And there's a picture of him. He looks about 89. He's got a floppy, scrappy-looking, scrubby beard down to the middle of his chest. Who the hell would hire him looking like that? And he's complaining because he can't get out of town, there's nowhere to go, and so on and so forth. Guys like that, he's probably a nice guy. What does he do? He hangs around the Union Hall all day. Boy, the chances of him finding a job hanging around the Union Hall do you understand where I'm going with that?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so what I said was, I would wager anybody, whatever the number is, that I could go anywhere in the United States with a decent-sized community. You ain't going to make it in a town of 2,000. I don't mean that you can't make a living in a town of 2,000, but not doing what I would want to do, and I wouldn't be comfortable. I need more of a population, from what I'm talking about, right? And what I said was I could take an old truck and I could make $40,000 the first year. That's what I said. Now, how would I do that? You know what the answer is?
No, that's what I've always wanted to know.
I don't know. Depend on the town. I can tell you what I would do, but I don't know what I would do to make money. Do you understand the distinction there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where do you suppose I would try to make some money? What would I be looking for? And I don't want to. That's foolish. That's a dumb question. I would go to the poor section of town. That's where the dough is. Not out in the burbs. I would be down in the poor section of town. And I don't know what I'd be doing down there. I would keep my eyes open because I know there would be needs that are being unmet. For example, I used to live in New Jersey, as you know. And the town right next door to where I served as mayor was New Brunswick, which is the county seat. Fair enough?
Yeah.
There was not one supermarket in the entire city of New Brunswick for a while. After the riots, nobody opened a supermarket in the whole city. Well, if you don't see opportunity in that, there's no hope for you. You see what I'm getting to?
I do.
Now, what did I do? I had a period of time when I had a business and I was way overextended. But the business was operative, and I wanted to keep it operative, and eventually it was going to dig its way out. And I also, on that business, I owned a truck. I used to go to the produce markets where they auction produce. The farmers would bring their stuff in.
Yeah.
And I'd go to and I'd sit there in the grandstand, got a bidding number and all that kind of stuff. And it was a matter of judgment, which was not all that sharp, but when I figured there was still it could be when the first couple of lots or first 10 truckloads of stuff that would go for a low price. People were waiting for it that you can get lower. On the other side of that, and the farmers all had to just draw lots, and you picked your place in line, number 1, number 100, okay? Or the prices would be high at first. You had to get a feel for things, because there were buyers for stores and that sort of thing out there, farm markets and the rest of it. Or alternatively, the prices would be high at the beginning, and then they would soften as truck after truck after truck was sold, and those buyers were satisfied. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Well, I used to sit there and try to outguess the market. In other words, if there was a truckload of what are called ripes, tomatoes, they're beautiful looking, but tomorrow they're going to be ready for the dumpster, there might be a market for ripes that day. On the other hand, there may be no ripe buyers. Well, if there were no ripe buyers, then you were bidding on this. I'd bid very low and sometimes pick it up for $50 a package. Whole basket of tomatoes for $50 a package. Now, after the sale, there was also a platform sale where people didn't want to hang around and wait to see if their stuff sold, and so it was stacked up on a platform. Then they'd have an auction out there, and every once in a while it'd be a bargain. I would bid on tomatoes, on cucumbers. Corn was very tricky because New Jersey corn is the best in the country, I believe, but it also has no shelf life. When that stuff is a day old, I mean, you'd feed it to the chickens. So I didn't bid on corn very much, but tomatoes, cucumbers, that sort of thing I used to bid on. Now I got it, and it's maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right?
Right.
I used to spend all night because in New Jersey, again, it's heavily populated, and one thing New Jersey is noted for, as you may know, is New Jersey diners. You know what a diner is, right?
Oh, that's Mount Kisco Diner.
Okay, well, the diners are open 24 hours a day. So you could go out and knock on a back door of a diner at 3 in the morning, and there was somebody back there. And I used to peddle the vegetables all night long until the back doors of the more traditional restaurants and the farm markets earlier in the day and the evening. And then when they were all gone home sleeping, I'd be going to just the diners. And there's usually a guy, first of all, from a background, they're almost all Greeks. And they all had the big cleavers. I got chased out of more damn markets with a guy with a cleaver cussing me out in Greek. But sooner or later, somebody'd say how much, and because if I didn't sell them by the next day, they were garbage. They went into the dumpster. Now, how many people would do that? Well, I know one who did it for that entire summer, and that was me. And oftentimes using my kids, who were, I don't remember how old, but they were most surely no more than 12, 13, something of that nature. Now, that was an opportunity, you see, and I saw that. And I know damn well, when I sold ice cream, I sold it in the ghetto because that's where the action was. Why was the action in the ghetto different than the one where you live?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it was all cash, and they would buy in smaller quantities, I would imagine.
No, you're missing it all. Really. I'm not trying to be unkind, but you're missing it.
Okay.
Because if you went to a nice middle-class suburban neighborhood, probably the place you live.
Right.
Suppose I went down the street ringing the bells at 11 o'clock at night. You'd be out with your shotgun.
That's true.
But you could go into the ghetto where there was no air conditioning at that time, or it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is today, and it was so damn hot, people would be sitting out in the stoops at 11 o'clock or midnight. I could sell ice cream at midnight on the street.
Point taken.
Well, I know it was because that's what I did back in the 1950s and the 60s, for a little while the 60s, mostly the 50s. You go into those neighborhoods, which were dangerous and all that sort of thing, but the point was there was a market there that wasn't anywhere else. And it didn't take me very long to figure that out when I was just a young kid, that the money was to be made in the poor neighborhoods. And I've never, in all these years I've told the story, but I've never said where. I have all kinds of emails. Tell us how you'd make the money with a truck. And I don't know in your part of I don't know in your neighborhood, in your city, but I can guarantee you that I could take somebody there. I used to bet that, well, if I was too old, I could have one of my kids. Now it would have to be one of my grandchildren. But the opportunities are still there. But you've got to have the eyes to see them. They're not going to be a big sign, here, come here and do this and make $50,000. That's not going to be there. But the opportunities are there, and it was my contention then and my contention to this day. The money is to be made in the less prosperous areas. My father used to say, and I never realized quite what he was saying, and my dad's been dead for 41 years. If you want to live with the classes, work with the masses. If you work with the if you live with the classes, if you work with the masses, you can live with the classes. If you work with the classes, you'll live with the masses. In other words, there's a hell of a lot more people eating at McDonald's than there are in a 4-star restaurant.
Agreed.
You're better off peddling hamburgers because there are a lot more people that will eat the hamburger. And that was pretty much the way I have operated all my life. That you can make a whole lot more money aiming to the middle people, or depending on what service you're offering. So, finally, after 20 years, I've tried to answer the question. I thank you very much for bringing it up again, and I certainly wish you so well. I'm Bruce Williams. WOSH Country.
Hey, Bruce.
Oshkosh. Hello there.
Hey, I'm calling to say thank you for the years of listening to you. I've listened to you for at least 10 years working patrol. I'm the guy that called you about the texting while driving controversy.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yep, and I just want to say on behalf of myself and some other law enforcement officers who listen to you, thank you very much, and we don't know who we're going to listen to now between 6 and 9 Central Daylight Time.
Well, you guys in your part of the spectrum have been very good to me. I know a great many people in your business because you're out and you're out and about and driving, then you stay alert and so forth, listen to the radio. And a number of you, I've had, I won't say countless, but a significant number of emails from police officers who have said they're going to miss me and so forth. And I am very touched by that. I'm glad that we can become part of your lives. You guys have, in my opinion, a very difficult job. It's not one that I would necessarily want to be part of.
Well, I appreciate that. And
even more now than it was some years ago with the political correctness part.
Oh, absolutely, and liability issues and et cetera, et cetera. But as you say, that's another show. But, what's great about your show is that you don't beat to your own drum. You're very easy to listen to. You're very articulate. Other radio talk show hosts will just ramble their number. You can't even understand what they're saying half the time. And you've just been just a joy to listen to. So I just want to say thank you very much with all the sincerity in the world.
Officer, I thank you very, very much. You hang in there, guy. I'm hoping maybe to come out to the EAA this year. I've talked to a neighbor. I have a friend up the street. He's a former 767 pilot. That's a big airplane. He flew for United, but of course he got kicked out when he was 60. Now it's 65. I'm not even sure 65 is an appropriate age. I think that there's 65 and there's 60 and there's 80. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He's one of the best pilots who ever lived, and he was still fighting the good fight when he was in his 80s, and more of a pilot than 99% of the guys who ever flew an airplane when he was in his 80s. But that's yet a whole other program. A whole other program. Oh, the political correctness. And again, I don't know if I think that's I don't give a damn if it was in, thanks for asking. I mean, there's certain stories that I remember so well. Did you talk to me right away? Okay, fine. Today, if you say anything to someone of a different race, suddenly you're a racist. I mean, you can't talk like that because after all, what a lot of garbage that is. There was a comedian in California who said, I hope, live for the, and he didn't, I live for the day when blacks are absolutely equal. Then I can call a guy an SOB, and strictly because he's an SOB, nobody can say I'm a racist. And there's a lot to be said for that. When I was a kid in high school, it was right after World War II. Boy, that really makes me a geezer, doesn't it? In any event, first day of high school, I think it was the first day, certainly the first day in this professor, a teacher's class, there was a little bit of a altercation. And for the names, and I know two of them. One guy's name actually was Dick Tracy, another guy was named Jack John Frost, and a third, I believe, was John Smith. And so you had to stand up in class and introduce yourself in class. Well, when it came, one guy stands up, what's your name? Dick Tracy. Richard Tracy. Well, could happen. But then right after him, the guy next to him or whatever was Jack Frost. Now the teacher is getting a little antsy. And then the next one was John Smith or something of that. All names that you would think, or John Jones maybe, you'd think that they made up. And he is getting, but he's tolerating. Well, this one kid came up and he came up with some real smart answer. And it happened the kid was, at the time we called him colored, because that was the expression. Black today, Afro-American, but at that time. And he made some real smart-ass name up or something of that nature. And he attracted the teacher's attention. Now, you can imagine this happening in today's world, and I'm sure somebody would say, well, it shouldn't be able to. Maybe not. Had nothing to do with this ethnicity. But I remember the kid because I saw him, the same kid, at a 50th anniversary of high school graduation, believe it or not. This guy stands up and he says, my name is Bodenschatz. Arno von Bodenschatz. That was his name, by the way. formerly Major Arno von Bodenschatz. In the I'm not sure how he put it, but far past, I have killed several people. One more will not matter in the slightest. And he walked over to that kid, picked him up over his head, and threw him out the window of the classroom. First floor, mercifully. And I'm sure he probably aimed him so his body hit flat. I don't know that. But I know there was no running around screaming child abuse. There was nobody running around talking about racial activity. But I know one thing. For the rest of the year in Arno von Bodenschatz's class, nobody, not Dick Tracy or Jack Frost or Bruce Williams, had the guts to give him any crap whatever. He has long since passed away. But I'll tell you, Major von Bodenschatz, you taught a whole classroom of kids more than they probably learned in the 4 years of high school. I'm Bruce Williams. Thank you so very much for your emails this evening and your calls saying, keep up the reminiscing and the stories and whatever. And some of you have asked if we can get a record, and we'll see if we can work that out, a recording. But the point is, I've enjoyed doing it this way. You might drop me a note if you want me to continue with this tomorrow evening. In the few hours remaining to us, I will do so. My sincere thanks to Zach doing this thing in the studio and all of you friends along the party line. You have been super. I'm Bruce Williams. God bless the United States of America.